everything is digital, which means it leaves data, and what's going on with that data, who's got access to that data, and so on and so on. How long do you keep that data? It's a lot of questions that come up the more we get, into this more digital interactions and more digital transactions that are taking place.
Welcome to the Human Insight Podcast, where we help you bridge the empathy gap to bring you a valuable, new understanding of some of the most innovative ideas and trends shaping the future of business and customer experience.
Hi, everyone. I'm Janelle Estes, Chief Insights Officer at UserTesting, and today we're very excited to have Brent Leary joining us on the Human Insight Podcast. Brent is a CRM industry analyst, advisor, author, speaker, and award-winning blogger. Thanks so much for joining us today, Brent, and welcome to the show.
Janelle, thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, likewise. So can you tell us a little bit about yourself, your background? I know I just covered quite a bit there in the intro, but I'd love to learn a little bit more about you and what's keeping you busy these days.
Yeah, I'm kind of glad this is a podcast so people can't see all the gray in my beard at this point. But I've been a CRM industry analyst or observer, as I like to say, for the better part of 2 decades. And before that, I was actually doing CRM implementations for PricewaterhouseCoopers and some other companies. So yeah, it's been really interesting watching just how much CRM has changed and also how much it hasn't changed in that time period. But it's a fascinating ride, and there's lots of things going on, which keeps me busy trying to keep up with all these things going on.
Yeah, it sounds about right. I love the idea of framing yourself as an observer. It makes a lot of sense because you're able to, and it sounds like you're able to and you have observed, as you said, the industry for a better part of a couple of decades. So I'm excited to pick your brain a little bit here. So I actually have a question around customer centricity. So I think you and I both have heard that term used quite prolifically over the last decade plus. What would you say is customer centricity, and what role does CRM play in a company who's trying to be customer centric?
Yeah, it's that term has been around quite a bit, and other terms have kind of come behind it, like I guess customer 360 view and things like that. But really, a customer-centric organization is one who really looks beyond the transaction. A lot of, especially over the past couple of decades, it felt like, at least from a customer standpoint, they were pretty much being valued just by the transaction and not by everything else that they could actually offer in terms of helping to improve the product or service, or look at ways that you could actually incorporate them into the company beyond the single transaction or the monthly subscription that companies offer them. So I think companies that are able to do that, to look beyond the transaction, actually be able to listen and engage customers beyond the financial benefits to the company, they are companies that become customer centric, and they're the ones that really benefit the most, because if you're able to do that, chances are customers are going to stick around longer. You're going to get more insights and have a better understanding of where they are and where they need to go, and then be able to help them along the journey, not try to guide them, but to listen and help. And maybe there is some guidance, but you don't get that if you just look at a customer as a transaction. They're only worth as much as the $29.99 a month. So yeah, that's kind of where I see it. In CRM, really, it started out as basically a place to hold data. It didn't, and unfortunately, there are a lot of people that still view it like that. But CRM is a good place to kind of manage your data, but it's kind of a foundational piece to the strategy of engaging customers beyond the transaction, being able to help them based on being able to observe what they're doing and what they're trying to do, and leverage CRM as a place to capture that data and analyze that data. But then the real work comes in creating products and services and experiences that are not just delivered because of data. They're delivered because it's kind of the right thing to do and helping them in their journey. So yeah, CRM I think is a pretty foundational part, but it's not the end all be all.
And that makes a lot of sense. And it's almost, as I'm sure, as the world of CRM has progressed, like you mentioned, it's a place to hold data, manage data, and perhaps even tell a story with data and how your customers engage with you over time. But to your point, that's not the only way we work to understand our customers. It's almost like I see it as a two-sided, a two-way conversation, right? It's what you perceive about your own customers through your data, but then it's also listening and talking to them as human beings, like you mentioned, to really, putting those two things together really tells that holistic story. There's often this tension, right, between customers being tracked, right, and tracking that data in an effort to provide better experiences versus being very transparent about that tracking with customers to sort of increase brand trust. So can you talk a little bit about that tension? Do you see that in the world of CRM and sort of the industry that you've been looking at for the last couple decades?
Yeah, I think you can see it, feel it, smell it, hear it, all that stuff a lot more over the last couple of years than even before, because I think as the term digital transformation really took root and more companies started, going down that line, and more of the interactions and transactions between customers and companies have become digital. Well, the more digital your interactions are, the more trackable they are, the more data you can capture. And then it's not about just, this single transaction. It's okay, well, what leads to that transaction? What can lead? How can we use data to get more transactions? And so it starts out, I think maybe in some circumstances, it does start out with a company wanting to provide better products and services and experiences, for the customer, because that'll be good for the company. But along the way, that capturing data provides opportunities that they probably weren't even thinking about originally. But because you're able to capture and look at all this data, then all of a sudden, some of the activities go from, well, we're doing this because it's good for the customer, to, oh, well, this is actually good for us. I mean, and I think that's where, we kind of have where we are today with this stuff is a lot of this data is being captured and used in ways that customers aren't even given the opportunity to say yay or nay to. And so when it gets to that point, customers, of course, lose trust, because eventually, customers are going to be like, why are you collecting that? And because they don't see that as a benefit to them, they see that as a benefit to the company. So I think we're at a point now where there's a lot of skepticism from the customers, because you're not only looking, customers feel like you're not only looking to make a sale off me. Now you're looking to use my data, in addition to my transactions, to do stuff. And a lot of that stuff is things that I wouldn't have said, yes to if I knew about it up front. So I think privacy is really just starting to become at the forefront of customers because of all the stories and all the things we're hearing. I think the Apple iOS update opened a lot of people's eyes about, what these apps are, how these app vendors are collecting all sorts of data, and then how that data is ending up in people's hands that, customers have no direct relationship with. So, yeah, I think we're now starting to see consumers, because of their experience and their kind of knowledge of what's been taking place, start to fight back. And companies who aren't in tune with that and don't understand what's going on and why customers are feeling this way are the ones that are going to be left behind. And it probably won't take too long for them to really feel it. Yeah, absolutely. I've definitely sensed that shift. Do you have recommendations for companies who might be listening, who are kind of grappling with this issue of, how
How do you communicate this to your customers in a way that actually builds trust versus sort of alienates them, which is really what's happening?
Yeah, I think it's not that difficult, but maybe it is that difficult. It's if you trust what you're doing is right, then you should be able to tell that story to customers, because consumers, they know that you guys, companies, vendors are in business, to sell them stuff, products, services, hopefully create experiences that are good and create value that's good on both ends. And we understand that as consumers. We know there's no free lunch, but companies, they just haven't been really forthright about how they're using the data, and because of that, the trust is being broken. I think if you say, hey, I want to use this data that from you to create better experiences, but also, hey, I'm going to benefit from it too, because we're going to use it to try to provide better products and services, but it would also benefit us because hopefully that means we'll sell more stuff to you. I think generally speaking, customers will understand it. What customers are not understanding is okay, I loaded your software on my website, and to help me create a more effective and efficient website, but I didn't know that by loading this plugin from you, that I'm going to load trackers from 20 different companies that I have absolutely no relationship to, and I don't know what they're doing with my data. It's stories like that really sours the relationship that vendors have with customers. But if they would just be honest and open and say, okay, look, either A, we're never going to do that, or B, this is what we're doing, this is who our relationships are with, this is what your data is going out towards, and this is what it should do for you. Oh yeah, we're gonna benefit too, but this is what this is what it is from your standpoint. This is what it means for you guys. Some people are going to say, heck no, or maybe some stronger language. But there'll be people that will say, okay, I get that. I understand that. Thank you for telling me that up front. Okay, I'll do it.
Yeah. So putting the customer in the driver's seat in terms of how they choose to have their data used, and also being transparent, perhaps even framing it in a way where it communicates the benefits to the customer, not just what the company is doing it for.
I would say it's even letting them know, yeah, this is what we're doing it for, and how we benefit from it. It benefits the customer, but hey, all right, yeah, it benefits us too. It's better to be open about it and say, yeah, you're going to benefit, we're going to benefit, we all benefit, as opposed to kind of making it feel a little bit too altruistic. Oh, we're just doing it for you guys. Chances are they're not.
I was having a discussion with some friends over the weekend. Now, when you get something delivered to your home, you'll receive a picture of the delivery, and it will show the item or package in your garage or on your front doorstep, just to show confirmation that the package had actually been delivered. And we were laughing because, we were looking at when you see those pictures in the app, you're just sort of like, oh God, is that my messy garage? Is that really what my garage looks like? So we were kind of cracking up about that. But then the conversation sort of divulged in the sense of like, well, what are they doing with those pictures? What are they, are they looking at what's in my garage? Are they to use that as an opportunity to market new products to me, to sell to me in different ways? And I think that is the reality of the way consumers think today, right? Everyone's very skeptical and almost paranoid at this point.
Yeah, I love that example, because on the surface, it's like, okay, yeah, you get it. You're telling us that it's been delivered and where it is, and that's great. But then, like you said, wow, they're capturing a whole lot of data. What's going on with those pictures after the fact? What are they sizing us up to send us advertising for things that it looks like we may need? So. But if you're open about it and say, hey, yeah, we're using this, it's used to make sure that you see that we delivered it. And then if you can go one or two ways. And once we know it's been delivered, we get rid of it. Or, all right, yeah, we hang on to it. We may do something with it to improve the experience, but those pictures aren't going away. At least you know what's up. because now you really don't. And you have these conversations like you were having with your friend. Oh, wow. I wonder what what they're doing with these pictures. It's the same with the facial recognition stuff. What are you doing with those pictures? Well, we kind of know what some of this stuff is being done with, but everything is digital, which means it leaves data, and what's going on with that data, who's got access to that data, and so on and so on. How long do you keep that data? It's a lot of questions that come up the more we get, into this more digital interactions and more digital transactions that are taking place.
Yep, absolutely. So I want to shift gears a little bit too. We've been talking about data capture by the company tracking behaviors that behaviors and actions to better understand your customers. But then there's this whole other element, which we talked a little bit about at the beginning, about having real conversations, actually capturing customer feedback versus just actions and behaviors. So can you talk a little bit about how the role of customer listening fits into this ecosystem, I guess, of customer understanding?
Well, I think good customer-centric companies are good listeners, generally speaking. It's not just about, hey, we got a new product, we'd love for you to buy it. It's like, we really want to understand what you're trying to do with your business, or what you're trying to do with your, this product. What is your need? What are you trying to do, to improve your life? And because that gives you much further understanding of what's going on beyond you trying to sell them something. To you understand, what they're trying to do, what they're, are they trying to improve this or that? And when you have that, the greater understanding, then typically that means you learned a lot, and now you have to try to apply what you learn, as opposed to talking a lot. And, I'm worried about selling you this more than I'm worried about understanding what you're trying to do, or what you're trying to improve. And that's just a much better situation to be in, because once again, you may be in a moment in time where you're trying to sell something, but it's just a moment in time. You want to be able to build a relationship that allows, your customers and prospects to feel like they can talk to you, and it's worth their time talking to you, because that discussion actually improves, on something that they're trying to do, or solve something that they're trying to do. But that is a moment in time. So what you want to do is build a relationship that creates a bunch of moment in times strung together, because that creates the journey that everybody talks about. And the journey is, you can't, as a company, you can't dictate that journey. Maybe in the past you could, because, there was choice was limited, and switching was, hard for a lot of folks to do. And, different kind of products and service, there are different kind of switching costs and all that kind of stuff. But generally speaking, the more things go digital, the less those hurdles are involved, which puts the power more so in the hands of the customer. And because of that, you really have to, be open to the real-time challenges and changes that happen to customers, and how they're able to, and what kind of their focus is at the minute. You can't do that if you're just worried about, selling stuff. You have to be really, in tune with what's going on with them, and be able to do that hopefully over an extended period of time. So you can't just do that if you're just in sales mode all the time. You have to be able to listen, and then not just listen and say, I feel your pain. All right, can you buy my stuff now? You got to be able to listen, and then put what you heard into some sort of new experience, new product, new service, and that'll extend the life of the relationship. And it also will chart the journey in a way that, the customer, you're getting the, kind of the intake from the customer that helps chart the journey, and helps you shape the journey in a way that, the customer is kind of directing the way that they need it to go.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's something too about looking beyond data and connecting with actual customers as human beings that helps people. It's the idea of, how your brain responds to stories and storytelling. A good way to do that in this space is to talk to a customer or 2 or 10 or 100 over time and really get to know them as human beings and not just these data points that you're tracking. And I think it sparks creativity for the team as well. So not only are you making that connection, but you have that person in mind when you're in solutioning mode or when you're coming up with creative ways to solve the problems that you've identified. And that's something that you've talked about in terms of how companies need to get better at listening to customers to kind of spark creativity. Can you expand a bit on that?
Yeah, the whole creativity, it almost feels like I can even and kind of couch it in terms of the way that digital transformation was approached pre-pandemic, and I think during and definitely going to be taking place post-pandemic. I think originally when folks talked about transformation, they really talked about how can we be more efficient with the way that we do things, that the same things that we do, I would like to do those more efficiently. And so digital transformation, this is just a very high level generalization, but it feels like digital transformation was more about digital translation or digital transition, meaning we're focused on doing what we always do, but more efficiently. And if we can find ways to use technology to do the same thing with using less resources and taking less time, that's our plan for digital transformation, which really wasn't. It was digital transition or translation. And I think that's kind of, now that we got forced into the pandemic and things had to shut down like overnight. And so the way that we always did things, like go to the store or, do all these kind of, in the traditional way we did that, we couldn't do it for a while. So that forced us had to look in different ways to do that stuff. And I think that's kind of where you saw a lot of creativity and more open-mindedness, because quite honestly, we were forced into it. But a lot of good came out of that. A lot of companies did change, their approach, their business model, to do something because they couldn't do it the way they were traditionally. And that was full transformation. So I think there's a lot of creativity that came out of that. There's a lot of innovation that came out of that. And it was, I think that actually definitely carries through to even more of that going forward, because I think companies found out, my goodness, I never thought about where we could go out of the box and do this or that, because they were so stuck in that box and they were just looking for technology to be more efficient about how they were able to act in that box. Now I think the box is widened, and in some ways it's actually gone. And so the companies that are finding the most success are the ones that have said, all right, just throw out the boxes. Wow, what can this stuff do? And maybe how will it allow us to have an even better relationship with customers, because now we're doing things that we hadn't even dreamed of doing, but now we know we can do it.
Yeah, absolutely. I always talk about how with the pandemic and how businesses have built these models and operating their business on customer behavior that was fairly predictable, all of that went out the window, right? When people were, buying lots and lots of toilet paper or, moving almost overnight to this buy online, pick up curbside. Like there's so many shifts in how people have done things. And really the forward-looking future is somewhat unpredictable. And so really the only way that you can get a good understanding of what your customers need and to make the right decisions, build the right experiences, create the right solutions, spark creativity, is to understand what they need as people and act on that. So you're preaching Absolutely. To the choir.
I'll pass the plate to you now. We can take up an offering.
In one of your weekly LinkedIn Live events, you said that even though technology is making things easier to do, it doesn't seem to be getting any easier to find, catch, and keep good customers. Can you talk a bit about why that's the case?
Yeah, I think that was during a conversation we call ourselves the 4 horsemen of the CRM apocalypse. All of us have been around for a couple of decades talking about this stuff. I think it's because you look at the technological developments over the past decade or even 5 years. I mean, just what we're doing now. I wasn't doing this a decade ago, or even 5 years ago. But I mean, we got all this great technology that allows us to pretty much have our own, broadcast networks, streaming broadcast networks, and then we have all these different devices. I think I just bought a phone that has like a terabyte of storage in it. I mean, that stuff is unheard of a decade ago. But so the technological developments haven't slowed down a bit. But that's not all the formula. Of course, you mentioned it. The formula is how to be more human, how to connect on different levels, how to go beyond the transaction and have a real relationship with customers. And so that challenge has been there all the time. And even as the technology is ramped up, it doesn't feel like we have caught up on the relationship front the way that technology has moved so quickly. So I think, it's about who uses the technology and how they use it more so than the technology itself. And that's why I keep saying, yeah, we can reach more people with technology. We have these platforms that makes it easy for us to do things like this. But that doesn't mean that we're doing or getting any better with actually building the relationship. And that takes a different kind of skill set. That takes a different kind of level of effort. That takes change, in some instances, changing the mindset to think more about the person that we're trying to deal with than the transaction that we're trying to get so that we can feed our families. It's very important, of course, but if you're just focused on that, then you're not going to be able to do what find, catch, and keep, build strong relationships, build long-term relationships. That in itself takes more than the latest and greatest technology.
Yeah, I love that analogy, or sorry, maybe it's not an analogy. I love sort of the reference that you made around, or comparison, that technology has advanced so much and how we do things, yet we haven't advanced our way and how we build relationships and understand our customers. And it's really interesting, right? Because when you think about building relationships, I think many people's minds often go to these one-on-one relationships. At least in some cases, mine does. Because those best relationships you make are when you have a human to human contact. But we all know in the reality of digital and these growing businesses, that's not always possible, and it doesn't really scale. So how do you think about that? How do you scale customer understanding to sort of catch up with the technology advancements that we've made?
Yeah, I think it's difficult, but I do some of a pretty significant amount of focus on the SMB space. And, if you look at mom and pop shops, local businesses, people, they used to come to the store. I hope they come back soon. I think they're coming back. But it was almost innate. It was very natural for these folks to build really close relationships with their customers, because they showed that they were interested. They showed that, they had a smile. They actually knew their names and their family and things like that. And when you have those kind of relationships, it makes it very easy to keep them longer. And I think what's going on currently is that these smaller business, the SMB space, because folks haven't been able to come in the way they used to, they are going through their own digital transformation, which allows them to reach a much broader audience of people. People are now selling things that they used to sell just locally. Now they're selling them to folks across the globe, because they realized they had to digitize. They realized they had to use the web to reach a broader audience. And now that they begin to do that, now their goal, and maybe it's a little more difficult, is to try to replicate that very innate relationship building they have face to face, trying to do that with folks that they may not ever see, but want to buy their products, and they want to, continually, try to build those kind of relationships. So I think the challenge is really, how do we use all this technology to be more human, to show empathy? And I'm seeing folks be able to do that because, I'll give you a great example. I just signed up for this service. A friend of mine has a big kind of anniversary for the book that he wrote. So I wanted to show some sort of appreciation for what he did and how important that book has been. And so I was like, let me see if I could find a service that allows me to do these video testimonials, so I can show him just how many people really appreciate all he's done. So I found this service called Tribute, and it makes it really easy for you to do that. So I signed up for it on a Saturday night. I had issues getting started with it. So I was like, oh my gosh. All right, I signed an email. I'll shoot him an email. I know I probably won't hear back from it, if I'm lucky, until the following Monday. Within an hour, I got an email back saying, "Oh, I would love to be able to help you out." And this is somebody I don't know where they are, but I know they're not local to me. And so I was like, "Oh, this is great. Thanks for sending me this. This is the problem I'm having. I'm sure, I'm just glad that you responded. Let me know that you get this." So not only did he respond right back, he's like, "Look, we cover you 24/7. If I'm not available, somebody else will be available, but I would love to help you right now." So what did that do from my perspective? It's like, oh my God, this guy, I don't know this person at all, but they're being attentive, they're being responsive, they solved my issue, and they did it on a Saturday night. That makes me want to, tell other people about this service, which is what I did. And I think it's just being available and being accessible and being helpful. And that goes a long way. Now, a lot of the companies, that are kind of on the smaller side, that are maybe more digital native, I think they get it. I think the companies that are less digital native are trying to figure it out. And I think that's helpful. But it's just about being human. I just had a question. I thought for sure I was not going to get an answer right away. I was prepared not to, look until Monday. And within an hour, I got it. And it was a friendly interaction. It wasn't, like thank you for sending this email. We did get it. Somebody will get back to you within 24 to 48 hours. I mean, we hate those emails. It's good to get, that somebody responded, but the response I got from that person was way better than that canned response. And that just in that short time period, they built somebody, a relationship with somebody that is going to sell their services for a long time, because it was that interaction. Service is great, but it was that interaction that made me say, wow, I need to, hey, if you're going to do this, this is the company you need to go to. And the reason I said that is not because it's a great service, but it's because there are actual people who are helpful. And I told this whole story like I'm telling now. That's how you do it.
Yeah, it's a great example. And you're right. When you have those types of experiences, you're dying to tell other people when you have the opportunity, because they are so few and far between. And they're almost delightful. They're a service it's a service interaction, customer service interaction, and you have expectations of how that works, right? That the automated response will get back to you in a few days. But the fact that it was different in a good way, yeah, those are the things that stick. That's for sure. All right. So wearing your prediction hat, which also has a Rams logo on it, how will customer data tracking, AI, machine learning, privacy concerns and rules, and really sort of the customer life cycle, what we just talked about, how is this all going to look in 5 years?
Well, it's funny because as fast as data is being created today, I don't think we've seen anything yet. More devices are being brought into the house. More interactions are going digital. And all that means is just an unbelievable amount of data is going to be created almost like every second. And so that means that there's going to be lots of data, lots of things about us that are going to be digitized and transmitted back to the vendors that we deal with. And to me, that's a bit scary if you think about it, because of all the things we kind of already talked about, and yet and still more data. We're going to be wearing, more wearable devices, more health systems tracking our real time, blood pressure and all these kinds of things. And kind of on the positive, a lot of good could come out of that. A lot better health opportunities come out of that. Maybe better experiences for shopping or taking in data. So there's definite positives. The drawback is, at least the way I see it currently, is all right. All that data is going into hands of people who have yet to be very open and transparent about how they're using our current data and how they used our data in the past. Now, I think from a consumer perspective, knowledge is kind of powerful. And so we feel like we know more about things, and we feel like maybe there's more opportunity to engage with vendors who are more upfront and truthful about things, how things are going to be used and how they're going to use the data. And I think, eventually there's probably going to be some legislation involved in that, but it's going to be an ongoing challenge, because it almost feels like some vendors, I don't want to overgeneralize, sometimes they start down this path with all good intent, but that data is almost sort of like some sort of an aphrodisiac or something. It's like, I can't live without the customer data because it gives me opportunities to do so many different things. And sometimes you start down that path and then you end up crossing, over to the dark side. And it's kind of hard once you cross over to the dark side. It's kind of hard to be open and transparent. It's kind of hard to, think about the customer and not just about how that benefits you. And, data is like, I want to say the new oil or something like that. So yeah, I think it's going to be an ongoing battle with all this great technology and all this great capabilities. The technology is only as good as the people who use it and the companies who use it. And companies are, they have to make money. And so sometimes, balancing that need with, customer data privacy and what's best for customers and things of that nature, it's a fine line. And I don't see that changing. I see that decision becoming harder and harder because more data is coming into their door.
Yeah, there's quite a bit of tension between those two things. And I think you're right, that tension will only become greater. So we're going to switch gears. I'm going to move over to what we call lightning questions. It's just a handful of quick questions that we ask everybody that comes on the show. So just anything that kind of comes to mind, and we'll move through them pretty quickly. So is there a book that you've read recently that you'd recommend to our listeners?
Actually, it's funny. I just got this book, From Slave Ship to Harvard, and it's by James H. Johnson. It's a book about a gentleman who was a slave back in the 1800s. One of his great-great-great-grandchildren was a doctor from Harvard, and kind of tying the story of the great-great-great-grandfather to the ancestor that graduated from Harvard Medical School. What a journey. Awesome book, awesome story. Please, anybody who's interested, even remotely curious about it, should check it out.
There's a story that tracks for both of the individuals in the book. So another thing that, we hear from our customers and just from the industry at large, there's this idea that we can never get enough data about our customers, yet sometimes we can be a little bit less, or we can be a little more thrifty around actually reaching out to our customers and getting customer feedback and doing the human type of customer understanding. So any advice you'd give to listeners who are sort of in that kind of conundrum where it's like the organization just wants more and more data and maybe not as much on the human side. So any any tips you'd give them to convince others?
Just think about your own, or tell your bosses to think about what they want when they're a consumer, or how they want to be treated when they're in a bind and they need help and assistance. It's not always about the end transaction. One of the things, I know this is a lightning round, but a stat, or I think I saw earlier this year from one of these vendor reports, was that call center, just blew up, of course, during the pandemic. People are calling for all sorts of reasons that they're having issues with. But 40% of those calls apparently were people just wanted to talk to another human being, which I found incredibly amazing. So just think about your own personal needs as you interact and tell your team what they, how they should act towards customers, because you can't look at them as a transaction. I know I keep saying that. If you think of them as a transaction, you're gonna lose them eventually, because they're actually humans, and humans need more than just facts and figures.
Yeah, absolutely. So another question for you. When you think about the future of CRM, of customer centricity, what are you most excited about?
Wow. I love the ability that we all are having to do things like this. I spend a lot of time on YouTube, and whenever I buy a new piece of technology, I don't go to the vendors. I go to YouTube, and a bunch of these folks, probably like tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people, it almost feels like they have their own TV show. It looks like anything that you would see on the traditional, broadcast channels. And it's just individuals who have a passion, and they have, bought what they needed. And it's not just, oh, we got this great technology. No, they have created, you can see they've created scripts, and they are following a blueprint. They're telling a story. They're showcasing, things that can be done. And I find that just great. And I think, I guess you call it the creator economy. I think it's really cool for folks who, we were limited, when I was a kid, to like 3 or 4 channels, to see what we've got today. I hardly ever look at the traditional broadcast networks, because there's way more going on with the creator economy and things like YouTube and TikTok and all these things, or things that we're doing with podcasting. I think it's great. And I think that's, you learn a lot from these folks that you would have never seen or heard of before, because we were so limited in scope to having to just see what's on ABC, NBC, CBS, Fox, whatever. So yeah, that's what I'm excited about. And I'm doing some of that, with the live stream stuff. And, I get more and more interested, and there's more and more opportunities to do these kinds of things. So I really get being excited, because it gives more exciting ways to connect with folks. And I know I've had an opportunity, people that I never heard of or never knew were even paying attention to this stuff, the LinkedIn Lives and things like that. I'm always surprised at how many people say, oh, by the way, I saw you the other day. I was watching this. Like, really? I didn't even know you. No, I was doing these kinds of things. I get excited about being able to use these different channels and technologies to connect in ways that 2 or 3 years ago you just wouldn't be able to do.
And you think about the amount of progress we've made in just a few years, what comes next? And I think that's right. It's exciting to think about how this all evolves.
Absolutely.
So Brent, thank you so much for joining us today. This has been a really great conversation. Really appreciate your perspective. I think we could have probably extended this another hour, but great to have you on, and thanks so much.
Thank you. I love the conversation we just had. Lots of things pop into my head right now because of it.
Want to keep the conversation going? You can visit our podcast hub, usertesting.com/podcast, and check out past episodes. If you haven't already, don't forget to follow us on Apple Podcast, Spotify, Overcast, or Google Play, so you can never miss a good episode. And if you enjoyed today's show, please share it with a friend or leave us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts.